it's so important that you live a life that you believe is driven for the right purpose. In terms of work, I think that also relates because as an apprentice as well, you are doing things for the first time, quite a lot of it. So you need to have a confidence in your ability, and you need to know how to take feedback and not to get super defensive. So even just by speaking about like the fruits of the spirit, so like love, kindness and everything, those characteristics just really help you in every part of what you do, but especially in the workplace, is so important.
Hello everyone, hope you're doing well, hope you're looking after yourselves. Welcome to another episode of The Student Guide, where we talk to amazing people doing amazing things and we learn important lessons along the way. Yes, we are slowly approaching, as mentioned in the first episode, we're slowly approaching 70 episodes of The Student Guide, which is crazy. We can't believe that after, I think, almost over 3 years of releasing it, we're slowly approaching the big 70, but even not too far away is 100 episodes. But it's been great having you here on the journey, and we really appreciate all your support and for sticking around. But yeah, we've got an amazing guest speaker today. They're a fellow podcaster. They're doing incredible work. But rather than me reading their bio, we're going to start off with introductions from them. So I'm going to hand over to our guest speaker. Could we please know a bit more about you and what you do?
Hello, so my name's Carley Luckett. I'm a current legal apprentice. I just finished sixth form and I'm only 2 months in my apprenticeship. I also have a podcast called the Christ-Centered Podcast, which I speak about all things relating to my faith. I'm also someone that loves fitness, so on the side of that also I make sure that I keep up with the gym, and I'm quite a sociable person, so if there's any like networking events or events I can go to, I try to make sure I'm there.
Perfect. And thank you very much, Carly. We're going to get started with we've got a name for it, for our new segment that we started in the last episode. This segment is brought to you by 44 Words. We will include the link to their website in the description below. But they're doing incredible work. They're an incredible bookmaker. If you want to know more about them, please type in 44 Words to Google to find out a bit more. But they have brought this segment called 44 Questions, where they will provide a question to help you as an audience, but also myself as a host to get to know our guests a bit more. So today's question is a bit of a two-parter. So Carly, the question basically is, what's something you don't know about yourself? And sort of like a follow-up or something that can help you with this question is, if you're not really sure what you don't know about yourself, what is something you've recently learnt about yourself?
Okay, something that I don't know about myself. I would say something that I don't know is how much I enjoy speaking to students. So I only found this out last week. So I was at the National Apprenticeship Show, and during that time I had the opportunity to speak to students and just hear about like where they are in their career and understand why they might be interested in law. And I've always been someone that I've enjoyed speaking to people my own age, but not necessarily people like maybe younger than me. So it was definitely a surprise to myself to understand that I actually enjoy speaking to people not just the same age or older, but also younger than me, because it's quite inspiring to hear their stories and why they're interested. So that's something that I've recently, I guess, learned about myself. And because of that, I think I'm going to try more to put myself out there with students.
That's incredible. And yeah, definitely from like your whole, we'll be discussing your whole journey and, your podcast as well. But I've seen a few episodes of your podcast, and we're connected on LinkedIn, and I see the content that you put out there. And I think especially for like 18-year-olds or like anyone who's at university, I would say, it is, as you mentioned, like great to see other people doing similar, like incredible work, because there's always this like misconception that your age limits you, in the sense of like whether you're sharing your journey, whether you're sort of talking about like your own experiences, even arguably like offering advice and like, I guess, career advice or like workshops to other people. There's always that idea in people's minds that, because they're not sort of like maybe have graduated or further along in their career, they essentially can't do that. They can't sort of like talk about these things. But from literally your answer is clear to see that, that's not the case. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing all the speaking engagements and stuff that you do in the future.
Thank you.
We're going to get kicked off with the very first question. And the very first question links actually to, the first thing that you mentioned, your apprenticeship. So as someone who's balancing a paralegal apprenticeship with your studies at the University of Law, how do you prioritize your well-being with while managing such a demanding schedule? Because I think that's one of the things that, as a well, not even just as a young person, but there's something that people always have to sort of like find that key balance, and that's very unique to everyone. That's very unique to like the individual, but it'd be amazing to hear essentially how you balance all of your responsibilities.
Yes, definitely. Like you said, it's very individualistic. I think sometimes as students, especially like when you might be quite ambitious or you want to do certain things, we can easily maybe look past well-being or just put it on the back burner. But recently, some things that's been helping me has actually been like planning rest. So like within my schedule, we can often like plan what like, we're doing and all the exciting things, but sometimes we can overlook planning rest. And that just prevents me from burning out and to like recharge myself, because sometimes if I don't sleep sufficiently enough, or if I'm just always on go mode, I don't have that chance to then show up the next day as my best self. So I think planning rest is important, and it's something that shouldn't be overlooked. And I guess today as well, in the current culture, it's all about like hustling, and sometimes people can look down on rest, but it actually allows you to then go out and hustle and be ambitious. So I would say definitely planning rest. Also, practicing gratitude has been important to me, because part of like my well-being is staying positive and having that positive approach. So being able to just be thankful for the opportunities I'm like getting given, and also just for life itself. Like I always thank God for life, because everyone has different maybe setbacks, and I'm just grateful for the position I've been put in. So just practicing gratitude can help you, because with everything, I guess the novelty can start to wear off, or you can start to focus on maybe the negatives. So it's so important to like look at the bigger picture of what's going on and just really be thankful for like what you've got. And like part of my faith as well, that is filling myself up spiritually. So for me, that's praying and reading the word of God. That really helps me. I think I kind of relate it to us like having a certain amount of energy and that needing to be charged in a way that works for someone. And for me, that's my faith. I think if we don't charge that like energy within us, maybe we'll start glitching, or maybe we could even like malfunction in that sense. So it's important that we charge ourselves in what way works for us.
100%. And I think, someone who's also Christian, I think one thing, I always like to shout out other podcasts and stuff, but I definitely recommend if people are looking to hear a discussion on something very similar to what we discussed here about like rest. There's a podcast that Trevor Noah does called What Now? It's on Spotify. You can also watch it on YouTube. But he did an episode with, I believe it's like two friends of his that sort of like help with they're involved in the podcast, and it was all around the idea of sort of like, what is one thing that you would enforce as an individual, like that should be done in the world. And one of the ones that was really interesting was this idea of the Sabbath, which for anyone who may be Jewish or anyone who's sort of like Christian, the whole idea of the Sabbath is like a day of rest. And the person was saying that, as you mentioned, in a society that's like promoting like hustling and always moving forward, never necessarily like taking a moment to stop, pause, rest, reflect, but sort of like move to the next thing and the next thing. He was, I think his name's Ben, but he was saying that it's important to, like, he was saying that the reason why I wanted to sort of like make that his rule was because he said sometimes he grew up Jewish. So he was saying that, like they were in the Jewish culture, sort of like the Sabbath day, they're not allowed to use electricity. It's a day of rest. They're not allowed to work. They can't sort of like cook. And there are certain rules about how they rest. But he said that growing up, that was something really important that sort of stuck with him. So I definitely do agree that there's this need of understanding the importance of rest within your life. And it's very interesting because we're recording on World Mental Health Day. which, wasn't planned, but I guess it's an important way to highlight the importance of rest for people's mental health as well. But it actually links to our mic check, which for those of you who don't know, our mic check is a fact or figure or story that relates to the conversation that we're having. And there's this really interesting one from Mind, which is a charity in the UK that focuses on sort of like promoting mental health and well-being for all people. But they did a survey, and 74% of UK adults have felt overwhelmed or unable to cope due to stress in the past year. And, this really highlights the importance of rest, well-being practices, but especially I think as we, we'll continue the conversation and discussing like careers, the demand that sometimes your career can have on your like personal life and well-being. That's something that as we've sort of started to highlight with this first question, but we're going to continue on discussing, is this idea of like managing your time, separating your like work life from your personal life, and encouraging those moments of rest. But yeah, we're now going to go on to the next question. And the next question is all about, I guess, talking about advice and continuing the idea that, Carley, you're doing incredible work, as I mentioned on LinkedIn. I see you posting about both your podcast, but also your personal journey. And it's really interesting to see because you're also posting on TikTok as well. And you're focusing on advising students who want to get into apprenticeships. You're also discussing well-being. And I think it is really interesting. So there's sort of like a bit of a segue that I'm going to like include, because I know we sort of discussing like apprenticeships. I haven't actually asked you how you got into an apprenticeship, because I know that not everyone listening or watching may know what an apprenticeship is, what that looks like in the UK, what even like a paralegal apprenticeship looks like. So actually, sorry, before we go to the next question, it was just basically to ask that, to say, essentially, what is a paralegal apprenticeship and what does that look like?
Yeah, so with my apprenticeship, it was something that I did know from quite, not early on, but relatively early on. When I was like in sixth form, I knew that I enjoyed the academic side, but I wanted that practicality. So an apprenticeship is just a way to learn, but also work at the same time. And with my current paralegal apprenticeship, each firm does it quite differently, so I can only talk on behalf of what I know. But I also know that, so some firms will put you in a legal team straight away, and then throughout the 2 years, you'll be working with the university, that could be any training provider, and you'd be getting that qualification. So 4 days a week, I work within my firm. So that's any task that the business got for me. And then 1 day a week, I take off that study day. And then over the 2 years, you would build up a portfolio that would then allow you to like get your level 3 or level 4 paralegal qualification. My firm does it slightly differently, where they ease us into it in a way that we're in the business service team for just a bit, so we get more of a familiar taste with the firm. So I'm in marketing at the moment, as that gives us like the foundation for the legal services. So yeah, it's just a way that it could work for different people. I'm aware that university is not for everyone, and an apprenticeship is definitely a great alternative, in my opinion.
Thank you very much for that, because I think one key, the key thing that you mentioned just there at the end is apprenticeships are not for everyone. Yeah. And that's not to say that people have to go to university or don't have to. And I think, we could have even said this as a mic check, because I know from speaking to like family, friends, or people who were, who are sort of similar ages to you, who are thinking about like going to university or like their next steps after sixth form. That was one of the biggest things that they mentioned, is that they were saying that, there's more options to me available than I was initially sort of told or initially thought. And yes, as you mentioned there, it is great for them to know, and especially through pages like yours, that, apprenticeships are an alternative route. They're a route that can help you to gain that practical experience while also sort of putting that knowledge you're learning while studying into like a practical setting, which is really valuable and important. But yeah, that nicely links to the second question, which was based on sort of all the advice that you've shared on apprenticeships and well-being through your content, what key tips would you share with young people who are looking to stay authentic and mentally resilient in such high-pressure environments?
Firstly, I would say to definitely know your why. Like, why are you doing this? I think for me, that's the foundation that keeps me consistent with it. Sometimes it can get maybe quite repetitive, or you may not feel like motivated to do it. I feel like as well, today we're constantly wanting to see results quite fast. So you might not be thinking, oh, this engagement's not working. And so it's definitely knowing your why that allows you to keep consistent and motivated. And for me, the why is to be the representation for people that look like me. And I want to get into the legal industry because it is unfortunately not as like representative as it could be. So it's for people in the position like me to, in my opinion, to voice that and to make it more accessible. And I feel like also not underestimating your environment. I'm very grateful that I have like an amazing supportive environment around me, the family and friends. But I feel like sometimes we can underestimate how important it is to have the right environment around you. And it's not a coincidence that since maybe I've had friends that are more aligned with my values, I've also been able to, execute my goals and plans. So I do really recommend having an environment that uplifts you and encourages you. And even if you've not got maybe those friends or family, I've personally experienced like a lot of encouragement on LinkedIn. People are super friendly and people also want to know like-minded people. So definitely putting yourself out there and connecting with those like-minded people can just really fuel you on the journey and keep you going. I would also just recommend having a goal, like what do you want from it? Because I feel like a lot of the time we can just get into the habit of doing things and it can become quite like a routine. But having that goal and then slowly like checking off what you're doing, it can really just help you stay disciplined and consistent and just also enjoying the process, because there's definitely a lot of enjoyment from it, especially when people are grateful or thankful for your advice. Like I really like hearing feedback in general, because it just helps me understand like what people might want to hear or like what's going well, and it's just great to help other people. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, I definitely agree that it is, seeing and also remembering like why you are doing what you're doing, whether that's through, as you mentioned, like through your like passion. So whether that's through, someone wants to start up a business, start up like a page, like a YouTube channel, a social media page, a podcast, knowing your why is really important. We'll actually get into it with our MC of the month a bit later on, so I won't go into too much detail about them now. But yeah, there's the person who's our MC of the month. They did this really great video talking about literally what you were saying about the importance of not getting lost in the engagement and, focusing on the sort of like how much maybe how many views you get within 24 hours and things like that. It's about remembering that you have you've got an interesting story and people want to know more about yourself as an individual. They want to hear like why you do what you do and why you enjoy what you do. And the biggest thing that I've heard through different conversations through this podcast, different conversations through other podcasts on Pick Up the Mic, is that understanding of sort of when you love, or you don't even need to, well, yes, when you love what you do, you will truly never get tired of doing what you're doing. Oh wait, maybe not necessarily never get tired, because there are days when I get tired sometimes of Pick Up the Mic, but more of the sense of the why will be that motivation to sort of like keep you going. Because I think when you steer so far away from your why that you don't necessarily know what it is anymore, that can be the real indicator of sort of like going back to the drawing board and reflecting on like what you want to do, what you do. And it's the same thing with like, I know, like when I was at uni, it was the same thing with certain people who like came to do a completely different degree for their masters. So actually, a close friend of mine and, someone, for our listeners from the beginning will know, Samuel, he did international politics when he went to uni. He said that after finishing his degree, he was just like, politics isn't for me. He went to the working world for about, I think it was a year or two. And then he said, actually, you know what? I really like psychology and like encouraging people to look after their mental health and well-being and supporting people, and completely did a career change. He came back, did a master's in psychology, and is now pursuing that career. And yeah, I think for him, it was just like reflecting on that, like what is my purpose? Why do I do what I do? What do I want people to, like, how can I impact people in a way that's like going to benefit them and support them and help them? And yeah, once you know that, it just makes everything that you do sort of like a lot clearer. And yeah, you're never lost on sort of like we mentioned here about the money, the attention, the fame, or anything like that. You're always just led by your purpose, essentially. But yeah, we're going to go on to the next question. And the next question is specifically about your podcast. So the Christ-Centered podcast was born from your faith and belief in Jesus and the transformative impact of his teachings. But we'd really like to know, essentially, how has your faith played a role in maintaining authenticity and well-being throughout your career journey? And I think sort of linking to that would be really great to know. I know you mentioned like what the podcast is about, but sort of diving into that a bit more as well. So what made you want to decide to do this as a podcast? How did those early days of podcasting go? Because, someone who's a fellow podcaster, I know that sometimes getting started can be the hardest thing. But yeah, it'd be really great to know a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I'll just go into firstly more about the podcast history, and then I'll just go into the other questions. So about the podcast, for me, when I gave my life to Christ, I've always loved the podcast generally. I've always just enjoyed it. And I didn't see that many young people maybe on a platform talking about Christ. And I know a lot of young people who are in faith, and I know how podcasts can just really help people in life generally. I listened to a podcast actually called Saved Not Soft by Emmy Moores, and that really helped me during my time finding Christ. So I definitely know the impact it can have. And it's just also, as well as talking about faith, but it's just also getting in a place where you can decide, you know what, it doesn't matter maybe how I look or like what I've got going on. I can still show up and I can still execute, because sometimes like I've been victim of this where I've been in the planning stage for too long. And I think the Christ-Centered podcast is just really just showing like it's okay to execute. Like you don't know everything and that's fine. But throughout the podcast, like God is with me and I'm just a vessel for the Holy Spirit. So that's why I don't feel like the pressure and I just take it day by day. I've also been versatile. I feel like sometimes when we have like a set plan, we can like want to fixate on that a bit. And like recently I felt led to change up the structure a bit. So I'm just kind of staying open to everything and staying consistent. So that's kind of like the history of the podcast. And then in terms of the transformative impact it's had like on my life and career, I think I want to start with like saying in John chapter 14 verse 6, I am the way, the truth and the life. And the life part has just really spoke to me because I've definitely had life more abundantly since following Jesus. And there's this confidence that I just can't explain, because I've never necessarily been someone that's super reserved. I do like my own space, don't get me wrong, but I feel like I almost call it Godfidence, because there's a certain confidence in the way I do things or what I would go for. So thankfully, I'm also like the vice chair of the Black Law Network. And I feel like maybe when I wasn't following Christ, I would have maybe not applied or put myself out there as much, because I might have had a certain fear of how people might have perceived me or like what I'm doing. But since following God, it's a thing where as long as I know that I'm accepted by God, I'm not so affected by the judgments of others, because other people will judge you anyways. And it's so important that you live a life that you believe is driven for the right purpose. In terms of work, I think that also relates, because as an apprentice as well, you are doing things for the first time, quite a lot of it. So you need to have a confidence in your ability, and you need to know how to take feedback and not to get super defensive. So even just by speaking about like the fruits of the Spirit, so like love, kindness and everything, those characteristics just really help you in every part of what you do, but especially in the workplace is so important. I also feel like it's had an impact on my peace. I would say even when there's things going on, I just have like a peace that surpasses all understanding, that can just keep going and flowing and like pushing me on. And that can happen in work when there may be a setback, or like in my personal life. So I definitely would say that's helped. And also rejection. Rejection I think is hard for anyone, if that's like a job opportunity you didn't get, or like something personal. But it's definitely changed my perspective since following God. In the beginning, I actually had a few apprenticeship rejections, and it wasn't great. I didn't enjoy it, of course. But I feel like God definitely redirected me to my current company, and just with the current opportunities I have. So I see it much more of a redirection. And I think that perspective changes a lot, because I feel like anything God has for me, I wouldn't miss out on. And I know that God has a plan for me that's better than my own. So just that alone, it just keeps me going and disciplined.
Thank you. And first off to say, that's an incredible story to hear. Because I think it's really key it's really the key element, that I can tell from literally what you just said is sort of that the importance of how faith not only sort of like keeps you grounded in the sense of sort of when, as you mentioned, like whether dealing with failure or difficult circumstances, but sort of like that encouragement and sort of knowing, I forgot. There's a scripture I don't remember off the top of my head, but there's a scripture that sort of reminds it's in Second Chronicles 20, but it's basically a story about a king during Israel's time, that basically God tells him that the battle belongs to me. Like, it's not, you don't have to worry about anything. You don't need to fight. The battle belongs to me, not you. So, and I think that's one key thing that I'd say from what you shared is that reminder that you don't have to have, like, everything's not in your control. And because it's not, that's not a bad thing. That's actually like a liberating thing, because you know that you have like a loving father that cares about what you're going through and how to, get to the places that he's called you to be. I think even from hearing your story, I'm not sure if you know the person, but, we shouted them out on the podcast a few times. They're called, they're a couple, Haley and Sterling Record. But they have their own podcast. I always recommend people to check it out. They actually recently released they released their like marriage film that they made for their wedding. But their whole podcast was talking about their journey as Christians, but also sort of like dealing with different things. But one key thing from their story, which I think Haley posted recently on LinkedIn, was she was showcasing that, I think almost 9 years ago, she did a video on, just when she was at secondary school, just talking about how she was going to be a motivational speaker, and do all these things. And she basically says that God was a huge part of, all the successes that she's got, and even getting to the place where she is today, she wouldn't have got there with God. So I think it's really key, as you mentioned there, the faith element. And even, interestingly enough, in the first episode of the season, myself, and I was hosting it with someone in our team called Josh. And that was like a key thing that came out from that as well, is that, sometimes when we allow ourselves to sort of like focus, I guess linking to what we were saying before about where your mind and your focus is on, are you focused on like your purpose and why you do it, and sort of like the person who's given you this vision and this dream to accomplish all these things? Are you focusing on that, or are you focusing on, achieving success, getting status, bringing in finances? And that's not to say that, whether you're a business owner or if you're a content creator or whatever, that those like finances is not important, but that's to say that, are you doing the things that you do because you want to truly impact people, or, showcase or even like, through your own podcast, showcase your journey of faith and your journey with God? Or are you just doing it because, is a person doing it because they just want to like get money, or because it's popular at the moment and things like that? And that's definitely something that I think everyone at any stage basically has to always just reflect and go back to. I guess the final point I'll say on this before we go to the final question is, funnily enough, there's something very similar to this in like a business sense. So there's this thing called the business model canvas, which someone at my university did a workshop on, and she was basically talking about the business model canvas is sort of like a big overview of what your business does. So you'll look at things like essentially your why. So, who's your target audience? How are you trying to help people? What do you offer? So are you offering services or products? What are those services or products? How do you distribute? How do you bring in cash? How do you spend your cash? Who is your competition, things like that. And the reason why that's really interesting is because the person at that session said, oh, the biggest thing that I can tell you from doing this session is even if you've, figured everything out in your business model canvas, she said, please go back and look at it, maybe in 6 months or a year, because she said, as you develop and grow, your business will change. And, you might think actually, you want to go into a new, complete different area with your business, or you want to expand your offerings or things like that. And that was really interesting because it's similar to, I guess, what we're discussing here of, you need to go back and figure out your why, because your why might have changed because you as an individual have grown and developed, and you've learned new things about yourself, you've learned new things maybe with your faith. And it's about, I'm not saying you necessarily have to do a business model canvas for you as an individual, but it's about having those conversations and just reflecting on what do you essentially want to do, what do you want to be. And this really important thing of pre-decide, that's one of the things that I recommend if anyone who is if anyone's Christian and they want to know about stuff that they can use, there's the YouVersion have this Bible app, and on their app they have a plan called Thinking Ahead, and it talks about this whole idea of pre-deciding what you want to be. So it's 7 key words that you'll basically pre-decide, and it that's the author basically encouraging people to pre-decide on. So it's talking about things about being an influencer, being a leader, and essentially the whole emphasis of pre-deciding is you're saying that's who I will be, not that's who I'm going to be, but that's who I will be. And you're now deciding, okay, well, today, what am I going to do to showcase that? So it's important to just think of it in that sense of slow steps you're taking every day to develop and grow. But yeah, we're going to go on to the final question before we go on to passing the mic. And this, I think, is a really important one. Mainly because, we are, at this time of recording, a lot of young people, similar to yourself, Carley, would have either, maybe just started their apprenticeships, or maybe be a few weeks in or a month into their apprenticeship. Some uni students would have only been this maybe their second or third week. But also, I guess, looking at our master students as well, they'll be coming to their graduation, getting into the corporate world. For a lot of them, it might be their first time being in the corporate world. So essentially all of that to just basically say there are many young professionals who'll be going into the corporate world, and this isn't necessarily something that only young people face, but this whole idea of struggling to find your personal identity and who you are as an individual within a corporate setting. So the question I would like to ask you, mental health is really important to us at Pick Up the Mic, and we love to share resources that can support your mental health. And that's why we are so glad to have today's sponsor. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get you started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live appointments when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't right for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom-picked for you, more scheduling flexibility, and at an affordable price. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/pickupthemic. I've also linked them down below in the description. So again, that's betterhelp, apprenticeship.com/pickupthemic and start your journey today. Is what advice do you have for those who feel pressured to conform and struggle with being their authentic selves at work?
So firstly, I would just recommend embracing who you are. I think for me, especially going from a sixth form environment into a corporate environment, it's a change that maybe I underestimated. There's a lot to adjust to, and it's not necessarily a bad thing at all. It's actually an amazing thing, but I feel like not enough people talk about the transition into it. And like, as a current apprentice, I'm 18 and there's a lot of people that's double my age, and I'm like one of the youngest in my firm. So it's very important that I know who I am and that I embrace who I am. I think sometimes people could maybe want to leave their true self at home and like maybe be someone else in the workplace to be socially acceptable and all these things. And of course, it's important that we remain professional and how you should act at work. But I think it's so important that we actually bring ourselves to work. Like, one thing about my firm, they really honour creativity. So that's something that's very important in being who you are. But also about if you're even not an apprentice or you're just trying to go into something new, embracing who you are will allow you to do that. Because like, I come from like a lower socioeconomic background. So if I was to allow that to kind of lead my life, maybe I wouldn't be in the positions I'm in. So it's important that we take like our history or our background or what's gone on to actually motivate us and keep us going, instead of keeping us stagnant or maybe using it as an excuse. And I think it's great to just recognize that there's many people in a situation. Sometimes you can think, oh, like, I'm alone in this, there's not many people that are like me here, but there's many people, maybe not in your environment, but like around the world, that are going through the exact same thing. And that's why like I personally just got on the platform to speak about it, just to help people who are maybe going through the same thing or aspire to be in a legal profession or whatever profession, because people are truly in that trying to be who they are. I would also, for me anyways, like being who I am, I think that also just comes back to knowing who I am, like knowing your identity, knowing your purpose. And for me, that is rooted in Christ. I think in all environments, you're not going to get along with everybody, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's just the nature of being human. It doesn't mean there's any like hostile behavior, but you may just not get on with someone, you may not click, and that's absolutely fine. I think it's just important on what you do with that. And because I know that like God accepts me for who I am, I don't feel maybe that I need to be super down about things, or I don't feel that pressure, because even if like man rejects me, I know God doesn't. So I think it's important to know who you are, because I think that's the foundation to maybe how you act and like the behaviors you form. I did also mention environment, but I think especially as you come to the corporate world, I was speaking to my friend about this, how like I've always been quite an independent person, but in sixth form, I've been used to just going to my friends, maybe lunch or like a minor inconvenience, and be like, guys, like, guess what? But, you know, at work, you've not got that. Well, I've not got that yet because I'm new. And that's fine. It takes time to build those like work relationships. So I think it's really important to have like a good environment around you, if that's in work or even outside work, because that really just keeps you going and keeps you focused on staying who you are. And just being patient with yourself is a massive one, especially when you're new to any profession. You're going to make mistakes, especially as an apprentice, you know, very young and not got like heaps of experience behind me, but that's fine. It's just about your attitude and how you respond to that. It can allow you to be your authentic self.
Well, yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you very much for that. We're now going to go on to passing the mic. So obviously, I'm not going to physically pass the mic over to Carley, but Carley, this is your time to ask me any questions that you would like. Yeah, over to you.
Okay, so firstly, I just want to ask, what was your motivating purpose behind starting Pick Up the Mic?
Yeah, so essentially, Pick Up the Mic started, so we sort of technically started in October 2020. So within my student union, they had the position of being the BME officer, or the Black Minority Ethnic Officer, and essentially I like went for the position. we were sort of like, it was still COVID, so we couldn't like campaign in person. So I was campaigning online. My friend Samuel and another friend of mine, Anushka, were like helping me to like get in touch with like different communities that the three of us knew. We were planning out like strategies to like, message people in group chats and like people that we knew that were still at Brunel to get involved and vote. And yeah, one of the key things from like all those conversations was a lot of the stuff in my manifesto like resonated with a lot of the students. So things like, I said that we should work with more Black-owned businesses when it comes to university placements. I said that, there should be, a focus and encouragement of Brunel students to sort of like know about the resources and like support available to them. So for example, there was a like therapy service that you could get for free through the university. There is a career like advisor that can read your CV and cover letter. There was a funding competition that's run by our like entrepreneur team at the university that offers £15,000 for like, it usually gets divided up between businesses, but there's like a pot of £15,000 that can go towards a business idea. And the biggest thing that I realized from like speaking to all these students was a lot of them didn't actually know any of this stuff existed. So yeah, essentially what happened, and I guess linking to the idea of like not letting failure limit you and sort of seeing the redirection that can come from it, is I didn't get elected, but I just felt like, it's a shame I didn't get elected, but I felt like I was having all these really cool conversations with people, and it felt kind of wrong to just leave the conversations, like to just leave them there just because I didn't get elected. So I spoke with, I spoke with my friends. I just told them, hey, I've got this idea for this like thing. I don't know what it is, but maybe we can just see what happens. So originally Pick Up the Mic was going to be an online like Zoom series that people could just hop on a Zoom call. They would hear like a panel. It was, I guess, sort of like a panel, like an online panel discussion or online talk. And then they would go. And then the plan was, maybe we would record it, share the recording for people who couldn't make it, things like that. But yeah, the biggest thing that sort of in the lead up to doing that first like one was we all just felt that essentially we were kind of tired of Zoom calls, because we said, you're connecting with your families on Zoom, you're doing like meetups with friends on Zoom, you're doing lectures on Zoom, you're like having revision sessions on Zoom, and we were just like, yeah, everyone's probably tired of Zoom to the point that they would prefer to just use like another platform instead. So yeah, we basically said, rather than doing that, we want to we went back to the drawing board and we're just like, wouldn't it be better if we did it as a podcast? So none of us had podcasting experience, and none of us had like marketing or like video production experience really, but we were just like, yeah, we think a podcast would work. So the three of us, so myself, Nanushka and Samuel, we jumped on a Zoom call, recorded our first episode on Zoom, and then, released it. And then we've just kept going ever since. People really liked our first, or like people were listening to our first season. We were just like, cool, let's expand onto YouTube. We went on YouTube and did like our first video one on Zoom as well. And then, the ball's just sort of like kept rolling since.
That's amazing. I think just part of what you were saying about how you didn't have like a heap of experience before. Sometimes people think you need like a load of experience to start something, but it's actually through starting you get the experience. So that's amazing to hear. Also, what would you say has been like your biggest challenge since starting the podcast?
I think it's sort of counts as like, I think there's two main things that I would say. I think the biggest one, or like one of the biggest ones, is always this idea of thinking that you have to like have the the best equipment, and like you have to like put out like a lot of money for it to actually do really well. And I think it was just from speaking to like my family at the time about it, like they were just like, no, you don't actually need to, because they were saying it's not the equipment and the like obviously like you want good audio quality, but they were saying it's not necessarily the camera quality and things like that are going to determine whether your video does successful or not. Because they said there are people on YouTube that, all they're doing is just recording stuff on their phone and they're getting loads of views. And there are people that have like super expensive cameras, maybe they've got their own studio, and they're not getting the same amount of views. And they were saying it's more about the story that you tell with what you're doing. And I think that was the biggest thing. It was the biggest realization that, you don't have to put so much pressure on yourself to like put so much money into buying all this stuff. You can let yourself like develop and grow. And then sometimes through those opportunities, it was actually what happened with Pick Up the Mic, is through just like doing Pick Up the Mic, some of the equipment that I was interested in getting, either others purchased it. So like my family got me the mic that I'm currently using at the moment. The webcam that I used, like I saved up a bit to get that, but also through just helping others, like organizations gave me like vouchers and stuff, or like even like paid opportunities to just like support them with work. So I think that would be like one of the biggest things is, one of the biggest challenges is thinking that you have to like have all this perfect equipment and spend loads of money to like get started. But the realization is that you don't. And then I think the second thing was sort of like establishing or like making it clear to people like who we were, because when we started, like our Instagram was Pick Up the Mic Brunel. The main reason why we did it was because we felt as if we just put Pick Up the Mic and we're getting in touch with people, like they'll be like, what is Pick Up the Mic? Even though we had like we had a website, we had like a bio and all of this stuff. We said most people, if they see someone getting in touch with them on LinkedIn, on Instagram, sorry, they won't necessarily review like the website and stuff. They might be like, who is this person like just getting in touch with me? So instead we put Brunel, but then the thing that we found out is that a lot of people when we started were thinking, oh, we're a Brunel society. So even if we were getting in touch with like organizations and saying like, oh, we share stories and, we give advice to young people and all of that, they were thinking we were coming from the approach of like being a Brunel society. So making that clarification in sort of like our branding, and I guess going back to the business model canvas of like going back to what we were, like what we wanted to do, really helped to clarify that. And then one final one that actually, I think probably out of these three is the biggest, is knowing that you don't have to do, like I saw this really interesting quote that it said, you can do anything, but you don't have to do everything. And I think that was one of the things I had to learn, was because when we started, I was working full time at the time. I would like do 9 to 5 work and then do podcast recordings sometimes, like at my like I was working at my university, so I'd do it at the university. I didn't live like near campus, so it would take me maybe like an hour or two. So everyone else would be going home at like 5:30. I would be like literally going to do a podcast recording, if maybe getting home around like 8 or 9. And yeah, it was just like trying to do a lot of things in the sense of also just, sometimes I did two podcast recordings back to back, because I was just like, I'm not going to be at Brunel for the next week. We need content. I need to like have it back to back. I was saying, it'd be really cool to have all these different like types of podcasts and stuff like that. But yeah, the biggest thing that I've learned and the biggest thing that sort of helped now is I don't have to do, just because like with Pick Up the Mic, we can like start up all these podcasts and do all these things, or I could do like 3 podcast recordings if I wanted to today, doesn't mean that I need to. And that's been really key, because it's been a reminder that you just need to go at the pace you just need to go at your pace. And that's different for everyone. For some people, maybe doing like 3 podcast recordings is perfectly fine to them. For some people, maybe doing like 1 a week is okay. But finding your like pace and sticking to it is something that can be a bit of a challenge. But once you've found it, and that's something that I'm definitely working on more. And I guess linking to that, us discussing the importance of rest, something that's definitely like helped to lead into that. But yeah, those would be the 3 challenges that I would say.
Yeah, that's definitely relatable. I think I kind of relate in terms of trying to maybe take on a bit too much at times, and then I've had to decide, it's actually okay to say no to things. It's great to obviously be open to opportunities, but there's a point where saying no is actually healthy, and definitely like prioritizing what's important in that moment. So I definitely agree. I know you've had like a few podcasters on here. And what would you say has been like the most inspiring piece of advice, or something that you've remembered and that's impacted you?
Good question. And now everyone who's been on the podcast is going to be listening attentively, because if I don't mention them, he'll be upset. I think I'm going to give like a cop out answer and then like a specific one. So my cop out answer would be like, I tell everyone that I love doing Pick Up the Mic, because every conversation including today's is really interesting, because I always come out learning something. And that could be maybe similar to what we were talking about, like off camera, like using a software. So like the software we're using here, which is Riverside. Sometimes it can be about learning things about like how I can like look after, I guess, like we were saying, like the importance of rest and balancing like work and life. Sometimes it can be about like, for some of the podcasts that we do on like anime and sci-fi and fantasy and gaming and stuff like that, sometimes it's just like learning a new game or a new anime that's out. So I really like that every conversation I'm coming out with different bits of knowledge and meeting someone new. And what's really great from that is sometimes, so as I mentioned off camera, like we had our like Black History Month panel discussion yesterday, and it was literally like through just speaking to people through the podcast, that's how a lot of the panelists like came about. So sometimes it's just that, like seeing the connections that are made and then seeing how you can then connect them with other people is really great. I would say the biggest moment though, from like, especially with this podcast, because this was the first one. So originally Pick Up the Mic, this was Pick Up the Mic. Pick Up the Mic was just one main podcast, and we had like additional content we did on the side. And then we like rebranded. We said Pick Up the Mic is a podcast network. And then this was named The Student Guide. But specifically with this podcast, especially because this is where everything sort of like got started, the biggest piece of advice I guess the biggest piece of advice and most memorable moment was our 50th episode. So we recorded the episode with this person called Indy Love Gordon. She's a credible individual, and I definitely recommend, if people want to learn more about her, and like she does open mic pitch events, so if people are looking to pitch, I definitely recommend checking out. It's called the 40% Club. Check them out on Instagram. But yeah, she does incredible work. And what I really liked about that episode was I met Indy at a networking event. We literally just got speaking, and I said, I'd really love to interview you for our 50th episode. And she said, yeah, cool. We'll get in touch. Get in touch. We'll organize something. The first time I tried to do the recording, there was an issue with like the train. So, by the time I got to her office to do the recording, the time had passed, like it was too late. And here's me thinking that maybe I'm going to just have to like head home. But she was really nice. She was just like, no, like, you can their office is based on like a co-working space. So, she was just like, oh yeah, you can stay in the office and like just work in the co-working space. And then when you want to go home, you can just let me know, you can go home. And I was like, oh wow, like, thank you so much. And that was really nice. And then the second time when we rearranged it, what was really nice was, I think we were only supposed to record for like maybe an hour. We ended up speaking, I think the first hour and a bit maybe was just Indy just wanted to know more about me as like an individual, like what was I studying? What did I want to do? Where did I want to go? Where do I see Pick Up the Mic going? All these questions. And it was really nice because I didn't expect that. But the biggest thing, which was one of the things that actually this segment was introduced that season, was for passing the mic. Instead of Indy asking me a question, she asked me to come up with I need to actually add it to my calendar so I can make sure it's released on that day. But she asked me to sort of do a message to myself for 3 years time. So, I think it was 3 or 5, either 3 or 5, but it was basically a message to myself for the future. And that was really impactful because, it was just like a really honest moment. And yeah, no one, apart from Indy, no one's heard it like to this day. And yeah, I'm looking forward to when I can like release that to everyone. But I think that was really impactful because it was something that just was like a nice, like, message to see, like, to reflect on like where Pick Up the Mic had been in that year, even to get to like 50 episodes when you're told that like most people who do podcasting don't get past their like first or second because they either lose interest or can't keep up with it or things like that, to get to 50 episodes on a podcast was just like a huge monumental moment. So being able to like sow a seed into the future of that, and, you know, to look forward, you know, was truly impactful. So yeah, that would be my, like, yeah, that would be the most memorable moment, and the moment that's had like the biggest impact. And like the advice that she gave during like the off-camera bit that we did before was like super beneficial to where Pick Up the Mic is today.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I definitely can't wait to hear that episode. That sounds great. Yeah, and I also find it very admirable with the consistency of Pick Up the Mic, because like you said, I guess a lot of people fall off of it, and this is definitely just proof of like consistency and like what it can do and where it can take you. In terms of the future for Pick Up the Mic, where would you kind of say you'd like it to go or like to see with the podcast?
So we've got a few things in the works. We're working on, so next March will be 4 years of Pick Up the Mic. So we are working on something to celebrate those 4 years. We're looking to celebrate something for those 4 years. It also may be pushed back to the 5th year to see, like, because 5 years, big achievement, so to make it like a big thing. But yeah, we're working on something like that. But I definitely see like Pick Up the Mic doing, it sort of like happened a bit more informally, in the sense of like some people have like reached out, or even like, funnily enough, it happened like maybe a month or two ago, that someone that I like used to go to air cadets with, I found out that he'd started podcasting, and like we were just talking about podcasting. So definitely doing a lot more work with like helping people who want to get into the world of podcasting. My dream would definitely be to like have a dedicated studio space, to either like let people, like, you know, teach people how to podcast, or to be a dedicated space where like Pick Up the Mic podcasts are recorded. We also want to like build my dream. I think I've forgotten who said it, but I think someone in the team joked that when I mentioned it, that I was trying to be like Thanos. But like, we want to like encourage people to join the network as well, because we, like, I guess like you said, like we know, like, particularly for most of the podcasts that we do, like I'm doing the editing, the marketing, the posting, all of that stuff. So we know that sometimes that can be pretty difficult for podcasters. So being able to offer that support would be really great, because we would tell people, you know, like, well, that's something that we're trying to like figure out what that would look like. But like in the easiest, or like in the simplest version of it, it would be like encouraging people to, like, if they have an idea, you know, we'll support with like recording. We might be able to provide a space, but, you know, even if we can't provide the space, like, we'll support you with the recording, the editing, and all of this, and then get you to a stage where, you know, you're just coming in to just host it. And if you did want to learn about like how to video edit and how to, like, what tools are available, how can you get a transcript for your episode and all this stuff, like telling you like the different tools we've used and stuff. Because this year was actually the first time we did a podcasting workshop with the organization. So yeah, that was really cool. So yeah, definitely like working with more organizations to highlight to young people like how they can get into the world of podcasting, offering more support like that. And then I think finally would just be connecting more of the like people that we already do that, but like a more like encouraging, having more like in-person, I think that's what I mean, like having more in-person events to allow those connections to be made. So we've done, so like I said, we've got the 2 panel discussions that we do a year. So we have one for Black History Month, one for International Women's Day. But we're also looking to see like if we can do that a bit more often, because yeah, the one like yesterday, the Black History Month panel was really impactful. It was really great. We got like a lot of great feedback from it, and I think the biggest takeaway that people said was, and I guess one thing to like comment on that was like that was the event that we saw the most people from like different communities come to the event. So not necessarily people who just either follow us already on LinkedIn, but we saw people from the co-working space where we held the event. We saw people from like different WhatsApp groups that we're part of, that, you know, opportunities for like People like Black creators are shared. Like we saw people attend through there. We're also on the Eric app, so we saw people come from the Eric app, which is like a resource hub for creatives. So yeah, seeing all these different people come from different communities, the biggest thing that they said is that they loved everyone there. They'd love for like more people to be able to come and connect. So yeah, we're definitely looking to see if we can make this like in-person networking event a more, maybe not necessarily monthly to begin with, but it'll eventually lead to a monthly occurrence so people can have those connections and meet new people.
That definitely sounds amazing and exciting as well. I'm definitely sure the visions will manifest just through seeing the podcast over time. And those networking events sound really impactful. I'd definitely consider attending one in the near future. It sounds great. I think that's all the questions I had to ask you, but it's been amazing to hear your answers. Amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And honestly, thanks for the amazing questions. Definitely was put in the hot seat. But yeah, thank you so much for that. We're going to now go on to MC of the Month, which we mentioned a few different organizations that we could put, or individuals. We mentioned Haley and Sterling, who've been previous MCs of the month. Our mic check moment came from Mind, who's also been an MC of the month. But from all the discussions today, I think they're an individual. I've tried to genuinely look if I can find their name, but I haven't been able to find it. But they're on Instagram, they're on YouTube, they're on TikTok, they're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. They're called Party of One Podcast. Now, for anyone who doesn't know or wants to know a bit more information, they're an individual in America. She posts like YouTube videos, but she also posts podcasts just talking about like specific things on like different topics. So sometimes they are linked to her faith. Sometimes she's Christian, so sometimes she talks about her experience with faith. She also sometimes talks about like more of the creative process, which has been really interesting. And yeah, one of the videos that I watched of hers quite recently, because I'd seen all her Instagram reels kept popping up. So I was just like, let me watch a full like episode. And it was really, I'd definitely recommend if anyone's like in the creative process, maybe you find yourself like starting a lot of projects, but you're not necessarily finishing them and you don't know why. That first, I think it's called I Start, But I Don't Finish. That was really impactful, and encouraged me to think of like not getting worried on the I guess kind of like we discussed here, like re-emphasizing the point of not letting the numbers determine the like whether or not you'll do content, because she mentioned that the important thing for her was getting the content out. And if she's talking about her experience, her personal journey, and if you're doing that and you're being authentic and you're talking about yourself, the numbers won't really matter, because whoever's engages with that content will come to it. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm trying to get into. It can be hard, especially if you're trying to work with organizations or like individuals, or you're trying to get like funding or like sponsorship and stuff like that, and they're just like, oh yeah, you need to have like X number of followers, or like have X number of views on YouTube or stuff like that. But it is really important to sort of like remember, and I guess like we've been saying throughout this conversation about your why, is remember going back to that drawing board. Because when like from that conversation, the biggest thing that I took was that if I'm sharing things on, like I'm sharing a, YouTube short or Instagram reel about like a personal experience I have, it does like I shouldn't get worried on, whether I get 10K views on the video. The more important thing is, am I happy with what I put out? And do I feel like it's going to, like this, what I'm saying in that video is going to impact people? So that would be, so there are MC of the month. I'll make sure that we tag their YouTube channel in the description. But yeah, I would say I haven't watched a lot of their videos. I've only watched the one, but I've seen a lot of their Instagram reels and they are very encouraging and very motivational. So that's Party of One, with the one being like the letter, sorry, not the letter one, the number one instead of like one written out. But yeah, Party of One podcast, check them out. Yeah, you might be able to find some really motivational stuff. And actually, sorry, one final thing about them is on their, like the link in bio that they've got for you on their Instagram page, it literally, as we were sort of discussing here about if you want to get into podcasting or like content creation, you don't know about the equipment to use, they've literally got like all the mics, cameras, that they use. They've also got like journals that they've referenced in episodes. If you're looking for a new skincare mask, they talk about that. But yeah, they've linked all of that on that page. So if you want to sort of like get into podcasting and you don't necessarily know about the right equipment to get, or you don't know about, like, you want to know at least a starting place. So maybe if you don't want to buy this equipment immediately, but it's something you want to, you know, work towards, maybe get funding or save towards, I would definitely recommend checking out their link in bio. But yeah, we'll also make sure we can put that in the description too. But yeah, we now come to the last segment of the day before we go to the outro, which is the takeaway segment. I know I spoke about it for the last season. We are working on getting this food sponsorship. As I mentioned, it will either be a local business or it will be possibly, you know, fingers crossed, if Deliveroo or Just Eat want to help us out. We'd love it. But yeah, we're not, for this one, we're not delivering food, but we're delivering like thoughts and words of wisdom to you. So, Carley, it's been great speaking to you. It's been great to learn more about your journey, your faith, your career. It's been great to hear all the amazing insights and, you know, the big message that you encourage of just, you know, not letting your age be the limiter of like the knowledge and the wisdom that you can share. But yeah, if our audience had to go home with a message, what would be the message you'd like them to go home with?
I would say, how is today positively impacting tomorrow? As sometimes we can get very fixated on the future, and it's important to always have a plan and to definitely plan out what we're trying to do. However, I've read this book called Atomic Habits, and it's about becoming that 1% better, and sometimes we can ignore the little subtle impacts and how over time that then compounds into like a bigger change. So I think just focusing on the current moment and the present is something that you can never underestimate, and it will always pay off. It also just decreases like any pressure you have over yourself, because sometimes if you're looking at like a 10-year plan, it can all seem a bit overwhelming, but there's just so much power in the now and just doing things in the moment. So that's the advice I'd give.
Thank you so much. And what's really interesting is actually in the Part Year 1 in their like link in bio, they've actually got that book there.
Oh wow!
So yeah, so I definitely would recommend. You've heard it here. Check out the book. Yeah, I think like you mentioned, it is just you know, people say it's just mastering those small habits and committing to them can allow you to see like the biggest changes in your life. And it is just figuring out like what's that way for you and like what's the best way for you to learn those habits. But yeah, I definitely agree. But yeah, we've now come to the end. Carley, it's been great speaking to you. It's been great learning about your journey, learning more about essentially your experience, and also hearing the amazing advice that you've given to our audience. We like to give this like ending before we go to like the main outro. I like to give this space for people to learn how they can find out more about you, how they could maybe connect with you if they've got any specific questions about maybe paralegal apprenticeships or apprenticeships in general. Maybe they want to follow your page. What is the best way for them to do that? And then the second thing I'm going to add is if you've got any like podcast episodes coming out, if you're looking for any guests, if you want anything to shout out, this is your space to do so.
Okay, so in terms of contacting me, my LinkedIn is definitely a platform that I'm on quite a bit, and then it has all my links. So that's links to my podcast platforms, which you can find on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, Amazon Music, Apple Music. You can also email me at chatwithcarleyluck@gmail.com if there's anything urgent or you want to speak about. In terms of the the upcoming podcast episodes, they are going to be a bit more different, as I kind of discussed with you off camera, which I'm excited about. Just more on inviting people on and speaking about either their testimony or a theme and topic and relating that back to faith. So it's going to be a lot more open in terms of hearing other perspectives. And in terms of who I would be looking to come on, I'm very much willing to communicate with anyone. I am aware that the podcast is quite small for the moment, so I'm just taking it one step at a time, but I would be open to any inquiries and information if you'd like to join the podcast.
Well, you heard it here first. If you're interested in being involved in the podcast, please get in touch with Carley. You've seen her be an amazing guest. You can check out her podcast to see her be an amazing host.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. We've come to the end of today's episode. If you like today's episode, like, comment, subscribe is always appreciated. If you want to make sure that you don't miss any other episodes of the Student Guide or any other episodes on the Pick Up the Mic YouTube channel, please make sure you click that notification bell at the bottom of the video. If you want to help support Pick Up the Mic or possibly get some discounts on our merch, you can join the Patreon page, which is linked down below. You get early access to some of our episodes, the cost of the price of a coffee. We've actually, first time me announcing it, but we actually do have a buy me a coffee page, and I can link that down below as well. You can support the podcast by doing that, and you get some, as I mentioned, discounts on certain things. And as I mentioned with the events things that we're ramping up, our Patreon members will get first access to that. And then finally, if you want to make sure that you don't miss any of our other podcasts, so as I mentioned, we look at things holistically. We've got our gaming, sci-fi, and anime channels. You can go to Senseis of Anime, which is, if you just type in Senseis of Anime, or if you go to the main Pick Up the Mic page, you'll find all three of the podcasts, other entertainment podcasts there. Make sure you subscribe. The two Maesters will be celebrating 50 episodes as well, so that's another great achievement for a Pick Up the Mic podcast. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of that, just go to the main Pick Up the Mic YouTube channel, and you'll see all of the different YouTube channels there. We're going to wrap things up with this chapter of the Student Guide. We're going to close the chapter there, and we'll see you next time when we speak to a new guest with an amazing topic, and we get to learn a bit more about how we and us as a whole, I guess, group can develop and grow. That's a bye from us here, and wishing you all the best. Okay, let me stop the record.